blessings come with responsibilities. Every privilege comes with a responsibility. When I was a kid, bicycles were everything. I mean, I lived in an awesome neighborhood that was just outside the city limits, and we had a block, and it was just, a residential neighborhood, very low traffic, very, very few cars on the road, so kids could ride their bikes everywhere, and we did. And there were lots of kids in our neighborhood, and your bike, when I was a kid, was everything. It was your identity, man. The kind of bike you had and the way you rode it said a lot about who you were. You could always tell where the gang was in the neighborhood. Just drive around the block and look for the driveway filled with bicycles, because that's where the gang was. Now, my first bike, my first real bike, I had a little green one with training wheels. So I don't count that one, okay? But after I got past the training wheel stage, my first real bike was a yellow and black single speed. It was the kind that you just pedaled or you went backwards, right, to stop. Sometimes we had those skidding contests in the driveway. Maybe you had those. You get pedal and slide as fast as you could. But anyways, a single speed. It had the big kind of chopper chrome handlebars and a big long banana seat. I don't know if my kids are probably looking at each other right now going, what's a banana seat? Well, a banana seat was, a long seat. And when I was a little kid, a long seat like that, man, I could get right up on the front of it and maybe get two of my friends on the back. And then, of course, sometimes, I don't know if you guys did this, but sometimes we'd try to ride people on the handlebars too, because those big handlebars, the way they were shaped. And I'm not saying we were smart, okay? I'm just saying this is what we did as kids. And man, we had so much fun with our bikes, and they just were, they meant so much to us, and they were freedom. It was a symbol of freedom, really. Where you could ride your bike said a lot about how grown up you were. See, because when I was a little kid, I could only ride my bike in my driveway. When I got a little bit older, I could go out and I could go up and down Manchester Road, which is our road, and I could go 2 houses over to my friend Paul's house, ride my bike all the way over to, 2 houses down. When I got a little older, this was a big deal. I could go around the block. It was almost a quarter mile to go around our block. That was a big deal. And then, of course, one of the big stepping stones was I could go to the other neighborhood. That's literally what we called it. During the time that our neighborhood was being built, there was a huge ravine with a creek and a woods that kind of ran through it that separated these 2 huge plots of land. And one neighborhood was built over here, and then you could have there's a connector road that went to the other whole section of that housing addition, or the other neighborhood as we called it. And I had a few friends over there. And once I got to like 4th grade or 3rd grade, Mom would let me ride my bike all the way over to the other neighborhood to play with Keith and Kevin and Toby. That was a big deal. Well, the holy grail of bike freedom was Rangeline Road. Our whole neighborhood was on the east side of Anderson, Indiana, just outside of the city limits. The city line was Rangeline Road. And it was a pretty busy road. Well, so, parents naturally, they didn't want their kids to cross that busy road until they were responsible enough to do it. When I reached that point, I was ready to take that rite of passage. And of course, the first trip across Rangeline Road was so that you could go across the field through 10th Street School, over to 10th Street, go up to Holland's Pharmacy and get candy, and then come back. That was like the big deal. Mom sat me down and she said, okay. She taught me this lesson. She said it formally to me for the first time. Now, Brady, I'm going to give you this privilege, okay? And you need to understand that this privilege comes with responsibilities. This is a blessing. This isn't a right. This isn't something you automatically get for the rest of your life. If you're not responsible with this, if you're not careful, if you don't come back when I tell you to come back, or what we agree upon, then you could lose this. And she really, really drove that home to me. Now, as I grew up, I learned that principle applied to pretty much all of life. I started bumping into it everywhere I turned. If I wanted an allowance, I got my allowance once a week. I got $10 a week when I was a kid. Now, in the 70s, $10 a week was a lot of money. And I had to mow the grass and do a few other things. And I had to be responsible to do the things I was supposed to do if I wanted my allowance. In 1979, at Eastside Middle School, I was in 7th grade. In our school, middle school was 7th and 8th grade. And so you were going from your little grade school to the big school, the big, middle school for junior high. And when we got there, Jay Harvey and I got this really sweet little job. First hour, we worked for the AV department, which is the audiovisual. And they had these carts back in that day that you could wheel the film strip projector around on. Yes, we actually used film strip projectors back then, and in the old time movie projectors where you would actually have to run the film down through and it'd catch it on the back end, right? And we would deliver all of the projectors or the AV equipment to classes that were going to be using it that day. Now, we would always be a little late to class because of that, but we were excused because that was our job. One day, it took us like 20 minutes into the first period to deliver and set up all these projectors. We'd had some issues, and so it was like 20 minutes after, and our whole class period was only 50 minutes. So Jay and I don't know why, we're 12, 13-year-old boys. We got testosterone running through our brains. It's clouding our thinking. I'm not saying this is smart, but we said, hey, let's skip first period. Let's just skip. Okay, let's do it. So what are we going to do? Let's go to the bathroom. Okay, so we went to the bathroom, this little bathroom in the back, down the back hall, and we just sat there for the whole hour, just waiting on first period to end. Heard the bell. We thought, oh yeah, we got away with it. That was awesome. We went down to, we were actually together in the second period too, Mr. Kahn's music class. We sat down, the bell rang, class started. We thought everything was cool, and in walked this little girl. And she was one of the dean's assistants, and she brought this paper to our teacher. Mr. Kahn said, Mr. Harvey and Mr. Windlan, the dean would like to see you. Oh, boy. So we went down there, and Mr. King, he revoked our privilege. Let's just say it that way. Matter of fact, he gave us a little added incentive to remember not to do that again. It was called bend over and hold your ankles and look forward. We did that back in that day, and man, Mr. Harless, who was our math teacher, he fired us up. We didn't skip class anymore, but we learned that if you're going to be given a privilege, you need to be responsible with it, right? If you're given the blessing of having a job and earning a paycheck, you need to show up on time. You need to clock in. You need to do your duties and be a good employee. If you're going to drive a car, and they're going to give you this blessing of having a license, you need to obey the laws and be a responsible driver. If you're going to be a friend, if you want friends, I should say, if you want the blessing of having friends, you need to be a responsible friend and be kind and thoughtful to your friends. Now, ultimately, I'm leading up to spiritual growth. This applies to your walk with Christ hugely. I have learned over and over and over again, and as a pastor, I've seen it so many times in the body of Christ, that you know what it costs you to grow old in your faith? Very little. You can grow old believing in Jesus without really tapping into faithfulness in terms of being responsible or pressing forward, or, any of that, pretty easily. But if you want to grow up in Christ, if you want to actually not just grow old, but grow up, grow deep in your walk with Christ, then you need to heed words like what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. It's not in the outline, so if you're taking notes, you might want to write that down. Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. Here's what Jesus says there. He said, if you want to be my disciple, then you have to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Okay? To take up your cross means to count yourself dead to the world. So Jesus is saying, look, if you want to grow into Christ likeness, that's what a disciple is striving to do, to become like their master, to grow up in his character and to live a fruitful life, and a life that will end at the last day hearing the master say, well done, good and faithful servant. Then you don't coast through that. You take your responsibilities that come along with the blessing of following Christ. You take those responsibilities seriously and you press in. It's an awesome lesson. So glad my mother taught me that. I think about it in every area of my life every day.
Hey man, Pastor Brad here, 80s Christian metal musician and teaching pastor. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support what I'm doing, I want to encourage you to check out my Patreon page, okay? The link will be in the description to this video below. Over on my Patreon page, I'll give you a full explanation of what I'm doing and how you can get involved in supporting it. God bless you. Thanks for your consideration. Bye-bye.